So picture this. The Prophet Muhammad has just passed away, and the new nation he built is, well, it's on the brink of complete collapse. Rebellions are popping up everywhere in what are known as the Ridda Wars. The whole thing is threatened from all sides. Now, how does a leader in that spot not only hold everything together, but actually build a force that's effective, disciplined, and motivated? Today, we're going to deconstruct the leadership principles of Abu Bakr during this incredibly intense time. And what we find is a surprisingly sophisticated system of command that honestly has lessons for us even today. Let's get into it.
You see, when you dig into these historical accounts, you find a code of conduct that goes way beyond just barking military orders. It's a whole approach that sees soldiers not as pawns on a chessboard, but as human beings. It's this idea that victory is something you build with character, long before the first battle even starts.
So we're going to explore this code through 5 key pillars that really defined his leadership style. We'll look at everything from personal vigilance and compassion, all the way to battlefield innovation and the spiritual core that, held the whole thing together.
All right, let's start with the first pillar, the leader's watchful eye. And no, this isn't about micromanaging everyone. It's about the leader setting the standard for alertness and taking personal, direct responsibility for security.
I mean, just imagine the pressure. The capital city, Medina, is under direct threat from rebel tribes. The closest enemy force is just one stage away. That's basically a single day's march. The city is totally vulnerable. Panic could have easily just taken over. But Abu Bakr's response? It wasn't to lock himself away in a command tent.
No, he was out there himself, on the ground, personally walking around, inspecting his troops and organizing the city's defenses. This is the perfect example of that core idea. A leader's real authority is built on what they do themselves. He didn't just tell people to be vigilant, he was vigilant.
And this idea of personal responsibility, it flows right into our second pillar, being a father to his men. This is where we see this really deep focus on the human side of warfare, something you don't always hear about in military history.
The principle here was actually pretty simple, but so profound. For Abu Bakr, leadership wasn't just about command. It was about care. He knew that an army is only as strong as its soldiers. Their physical and mental health isn't some kind of luxury. It's a strategic necessity, a moral imperative. And this was a principle he drilled into all of his commanders.
Now just listen to how personal this advice is. In a letter to one of his top generals, Amr ibn al-As, he doesn't talk about aggression or conquest. He says, "Be like a father." It's an instruction that's just rooted in empathy. It shows that a real leader guides not just with orders, but with genuine compassion.
And this wasn't just some nice, fuzzy sentiment, right? It had direct, practical applications. Commanders were ordered to hire local guides to find the easiest paths. They were told to march through areas with water and pastures. The whole point was to make sure the army arrived at the battlefield rested and with high morale, not totally exhausted and broken down.
So this focus on people naturally leads us to our third pillar, the wisdom of counsel. Abu Bakr knew that no single person, no matter how smart, has all the answers, especially not in the fog of war. He made consultation, or shura, a core part of military policy. And it wasn't just for him at the very top. He actively commanded his generals out in the field to talk to their own officers and to talk to each other. He was basically building a collaborative command structure from the ground up. But for any of this to work, Abu Bakr laid down a critical ground rule. In this advice to another commander, Yazid, he insists on total transparency. He says, describe the situation honestly. Do not conceal anything. Because he understood that real strength comes from honest, unfiltered advice, not from people just telling you what you want to hear. Okay, so let's see how these principles, vigilance, compassion, and counsel, actually translate in action. Our fourth pillar is mastering the battlefield, which covers both clever strategy and nuts and bolts security. So, let's start with a classic military problem, right? You're facing an enemy that has way more soldiers than you do. How do you get a psychological edge before the fighting even starts?
Well, at the huge Battle of Yarmouk, the commander, Khalid ibn al-Walid, came up with this really ingenious solution. Instead of marching as one big, dense block of soldiers, he organized them into smaller, separate squadrons with big gaps in between. This let the army spread out, cover more ground, and move with a whole lot more agility. And here's Khalid's own reasoning for it. It was a brilliant mix of tactical flexibility and straight-up psychological warfare. It made his army look way bigger than it actually was, which could intimidate the enemy and, at the same time, boost the morale of his own men.
But here's the thing.
All the innovative tactics in the world are completely worthless if your army gets wiped out the night before. Abu Bakr was acutely aware that the most dangerous enemy is the one you just don't see coming.
He specifically warned his commanders about the very common tactic of surprise night raids. And this wasn't some general, hey, be careful out there message. This was a specific intelligence brief based on a deep understanding of how the enemy operated.
And he backed up that warning with this incredibly detailed security protocol. It's amazing, really. Not just guards on the perimeter, but internal guards as well. He ordered commanders to do surprise checks to keep everyone alert. And then he told the commanders themselves to stay up with their troops, which is a huge show of solidarity and really the ultimate layer of security.
All of these principles, the vigilance, the compassion, the counsel, the security, they all rest on one final, absolutely crucial foundation. What was it that motivated these soldiers and commanders to stick to such a demanding code?
This is where Abu Bakr ties it all together. In his address to the army heading for Syria, he doesn't just talk about winning or getting spoils of war. He frames their entire mission as a transaction with the divine, reminding them of the Quranic promise, this trade that saves you from punishment and grants you real honor. He taught them that their discipline was a way of fulfilling this sacred pact.
And that, right there, is the key that unlocks the entire system. Because when he does this, every order followed, every guard duty performed, every act of kindness shown to a fellow soldier. It was no longer just a military duty. It became an act of worship. It became a way of fulfilling a spiritual covenant. And that gave them a powerful unifying purpose that went way beyond the battlefield.
And so, the leadership code of Abu Bakr really forces us to ask a bigger question. What is the true potential of any group, whether it's an army, a company, or a community, when its leadership is built not just on clever strategy, but on a profound sense of shared moral and spiritual duty?